Tēnā koutou, no mai haere mai. Welcome to Newsroom, where we dissect the news in detail from far and wide, from the perspective of our highly skilled panel, which tonight includes, welcome back, Paddy Lewis.
Thank you, Bill.
Nice to have you on the panel, journalist Paddy Lewis. Also, Karen Arnold.
Hi, Bill.
Karen, we just introduced you as being, well, what you're best known for, City Councillor amongst other things you do, and journalist Hunter Andrews. Got a lot of topics to talk about tonight. The first one we're going to talk about, though, is Rugby Park. And Karen, I want to ask you about it because I don't expect you, of course, to make any divulgence of what the council might do, but there is information I know that the council is looking for, and opinions, I suppose, from the public, the ratepayers the council is looking for on this, because it's a massive decision to take this thing on.
Yeah, well, I don't even know what the decision is that is going to be before the council, because we haven't even got to that stage yet. So I think in the next couple of weeks, maybe a week, I'm not even sure, that something's going to be put before the council relating to the Rugby Park Stadium. I don't know what that is, and I think the feeling around the council table is that there's quite a few that do want to know what that is. And so I don't think we're in a position to say that there's going to be an outcome one way or the other, because we don't know what's required to happen. But you know, as a journalist, I was working for the Sunday Star Times when the whole Otago Stadium debate was unfolding, and it was terrifying to see how people got caught up in the emotive aspect of rugby and what it had been and how great it had been for the province. And it was almost a desperate clutch at the heyday of great memories from, you know, men that were ageing and wanted to recapture that time that was really important in their lives. And a whole lot of people got sucked in, and part of what happened with the Dunedin City Council at the time was that they did not demand robust, independent information. And if they had considered it without the emotion attached to rugby, then I don't think they would be in the position that they are now, because there was a Price Waterhouse peer review of it, and the figures that were missing and the calculations that had been done it was just, you know, figures on the back of a serviette. It was just terrible. Well, but the thing is that now our city council must demand good, robust information, and not just look at what the history of Rugby Park has been and the income and the revenue streams, but we must have a critical look at the future of rugby, not just in the next 5 or 10 years, but further out, because there's a real risk, I believe, is that rugby in general is going to fold over, and without an anchor tenant such as Rugby Southland is at the moment, we could find ourselves with this enormous park, stadium, you know, grandstand, etc., and not have a tenant. And then what do? You're maintaining something for nothing. So we need robust information about what the actual maintenance costs are, what the earthquake status of the stands are, and how robust is the future of Rugby Southland and rugby in this province. We really need to know that.
Paddy, should the council be getting into this at all, do you think?
No, not at all. I mean, first, a bit of history. A lot of people don't realise that the Southland Outdoor Stadium Trust was set up as a vehicle just to take the stadium and its associated costs, the depreciation, the maintenance, everything, off Rugby Southland's books.
To get them out of the crap, basically.
Well, on a ongoing basis, on a long-term basis. Now, if you look at the trust deed for the Southland Outdoor Stadium Trust, you've got a whole lot of people there who were appointed because it says in the trust deed there's got to be so many board members from Rugby Southland, there's got to be a representative from the education sector. So you've got all these poor buggers on the trust who are thinking, whereas Rugby Southland under Roger Clark told them, don't worry, we'll sort everything out. They haven't generated one new revenue stream for at least 8, 9, maybe 10 years.
Right.
So you're saying they've got 5 ITM Cup games probably, and the club final, rugby club final there?
Yeah,
is that about
and they'll throw maybe the Rugby League club final in there too, so it looks like they're being gracious hosts.
And aren't the corporate boxes one of their main
The corporate
sources of
boxes
income.
is the only source of
So
income.
as soon as your corporate sponsors and etc. stop supporting, it's a scary thing.
When you say their source of income, do you mean the trust or do you mean
The
Rugby
trust.
Southland?
The
Okay,
trust.
right.
But I mean, there's some very creative accounting going on if you look at their accounts. Rugby Southland charged them, and this is from the 2010 accounts because they haven't been able to file their accounts on time. $150,000 for administration. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Okay. And that's an account from Rugby Southland to the Outdoor Stadium Trust. Right.
I think one of the things that interests me is that the Bluff Coast Guard, for example, has been running their fundraising campaign to replace their rescue boat,
Yeah.
and they had a target of $1 million. And people, most people in Southland aren't even connected to the sea in that way, but we see the value of it. And I find it incredible that even though this situation has been developing for years and years and years, there's never actually been a campaign of any sort to say, okay, if rugby is really, really important to this province and you want it to, go forward, we need your help. Come on,
But
people.
I've been heavily involved in rugby for many years, and there's always been this focus on the Stags and we've got to save Rugby Park, and
Yep.
Club Rugby has had nothing done for it by Rugby Southland. When Rugby Southland got in the poo and had to be extricated by the community funders a few years ago, the first thing they did was cut the funding to the junior rep teams, or force the kids to pay to go away to tournaments, or pay quite a bit more to go away to tournaments. There really is a real lack of, or a real focus on the elite and on the stadium, and not on anything else. And rugby means a lot to a lot of people in Southland at the club level. I think if Rugby Park fell over, so long as club rugby could carry on, a lot of people would say, oh well, too bad.
Yep.
I mean, they attracted an average crowd last year of 6,000, I think. Gore
Is it-
Showgrounds has got a perfectly good stadium that would hold 6,000 people, so why not go
and
there?
it's the Southland team, it's not
Yeah.
the Invercargill rugby.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a solution? I mean, if you were running the show, like if you were if you had a dictatorial powers over that stadium, what would you do?
I'd be looking at the revenue, the extra revenue streams you can get
Right.
from renting it. I mean, the advertising. There's a advertising hoarding down the end of this street that it gets. I think it's $10,000 a month to rent.
Yes.
I mean, they've got an enormous amount of space with huge traffic numbers going past every day, and we have the only thing they have up is a banner advertising that there was a game against Hawke's Bay, sort of the mid to end of last year.
Right. Right.
There's that for a start. I mean, there's so many things that
So
they
you're
could
talking
be doing.
about proper business management for the thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the council should keep out of it because
Yes.
it's an extra burden on them.
Yeah, and well, it's ratepayers.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor old ratepayers, take one in the chook again because Tim and Richard think it's something that's got to be saved.
Well, Tim has said publicly in media, certainly on QTV, that he believes the council should. It's inevitable. The next step will be for council to take it over.
It's an awfully dangerous precedent too, because do they then take over the hockey turf? Do they then take over Queen's Park, the Queen's Park cricket ground when it gets in trouble? I mean, there's an awful precedent that they're setting themselves up for here.
Well, all I can say is that as an elected city councillor, we're not at that stage yet, and there may be a few people behind the scenes that like to think we are, but I'm darn sure that I'll be doing my bit to make sure that the information put towards us is robust, and some of these hard questions can be answered. It's not good enough just to rubber stamp deals that have been discussed behind closed doors. Yeah, without the public and the council having a say so.
Hunter, I know you've got a perspective on this, but what would happen? Let's say, following what Paddy said, the council says no, we're not having a bar of it, and Rugby Southland says to the trust we want our 600,000, and the community trust says we want our 750,000 back. Can the city, just from the people that you've spoken, I know you've spoken to a few, can the city stand an unused unwanted edifice sitting in the middle of it.
Well, I mean, isn't that the ultimate lesson learned? That after years and years of taking us to where we are right now, is there that bailout? I mean, the last time that the rugby union received assistance was it 2008, when
Yes,
this is
that's
when
when
the
it all
problem with
turned-
the
went
community
pear-shaped.
trust has happened. So, where do you get to the point of saying, well, you know, maybe we can't afford this massive ground, powering these lights or whatever? And your point about Gore is interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It is a great ground there, but the lighting, it's got to work with Sky too, hasn't it? You
Yeah,
know,
but
and we're being told in 2017 we're going to get a Lions match.
Might.
So, you know,
Can I just
well,
go back
that's
from
worth
there?
hanging on to it
Can
for,
I,
isn't
can
it?
can I just go back, just to clarify something? Community Trust of Southland is not asking for its $750,000 back. Now, I had a conversation with Chief Executive John Prendergast last week.
Yeah.
They've forgiven $200,000 of that loan, and they've said we don't require the other $550,000 anytime soon. You pay your debt to the New Zealand Rugby Union first, and then when you're able to, start paying us back. So there's no pressure on, and that $750,000 does not exist. So it's out of the equation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Karen's right too, because I don't think payments are required on that until 2018.
Yeah.
After the Lions tour.
So they'll
make all the money.
they might be able to pay it back with interest then.
Yes, well, I mean, there's a limit to the number of people you can stack in that through those gates, Hunter.
Well, you know, it's one of those community assets that you look at and think, well, you know, I never really considered it that much until it was pointed out to me the 5 games in the club rugby final for a massive piece of infrastructure like that. It is quite amazing.
And it is not a community asset. It's
because
a
the
very
community doesn't use
limited
it.
use asset at
So
the
what
moment.
do you suggest for that? I joked with Tim that perhaps the council should move in there.
Yeah, well, I've said that as well. I mean, you know, it's a good opportunity to cut council staff because the council's bloated.
Now we're moving off on
there's-
another
there's
tangent.
plenty of
Hold the meetings on the field and everybody could
Well,
watch.
no, that first 15 lounge is perfectly adequate for a council meeting. There's plenty of room downstairs. The rugby Southland staff only need the scoreboard building. They could all fit in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a win-win. Or
Not
you know,
out of
if
the
Girls
question, is
High
it?
if Girls High got more international students, you could bowl the stadium and build a whole lot of little townhouses there.
Well, there you go.
Imagine that. Eric Roy said it was not worth thinking about. The Southland without the Stags or Rugby Park, it just wasn't worth imagining.
But
Well,
again, it's that old school, you know, harking back to the good old days. They're gone. They're gone. We have to be really, really smart, and I'm just hope that the people of this city and province, if they want that stadium, stand up and say so. And if you don't, also stand up and say so.
So the message is, council wants submissions, do they? Or
Well, we haven't got to that stage
Oh, right,
yet.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
part of the draft annual
No,
plan.
but
No.
we've been assured, so I'll say it now, that there will be the public will get the chance to...
But we already had our chance to have a say on it 2 draft annual plans ago, and it came
I
back.
wasn't there then.
It came back around no, and they went, okay, we're not going to put money into the into the stadium. So what is it? Does it just show up? Are they just going to keep throwing it up? I think there's got to be some accountability, and I think Rugby Southland and the poor old Stadium Trust, I've got a bit of sympathy for them
Yes.
because they're just lumped in there as a vehicle to take it off Rugby Southland's books. But I think Rugby Southland's really got to be accountable here and start, if they want, there's got to be a quid pro quo that they have to grow the revenue streams.
And where is the New Zealand Rugby Union or all this, you know? Where
Well,
are
Steve
they?
Chu was here a couple of weeks ago. He doesn't come to Southland just for a chat.
Actually,
we would
I
like
mean,
to be a
it's,
fly on the
it's a
wall in some
huge
of these
issue,
meetings.
and I think in my years of knowing Ian Tulloch, I think that he has always returned a phone call, and he didn't a couple of weeks ago, and I think he'll be feeling it too. I did get through to him, and he was tight-lipped about everything. Nothing off the record, nothing like that. No hint at anything. So
Interesting. And talking about the old days that you were talking about, Karen, a quick segue into when we did not have legal highs, Hunter. Rather a revelation
we had
from...
illegal highs.
Yeah, we had illegal highs, yeah. A revelation on South Night News a couple of nights ago.
Though. Well, for me, it began at that protest. It began last year at that meeting and listening to the mothers of usually sons, but of course there's daughters smoking this as well, of course, but young people, and all from all age groups anyway, listening to those sad stories, you know, those sad stories about violence and catatonic states and lack of motivation and smashing up the house. I actually felt genuinely moved when I was listening to them on Saturday at that protest. Yeah. Let's not get into debating who was there and who wasn't there, but I felt genuinely moved, and to my astonishment, and Margot had just run a few questions in the newsroom, run a few questions by the Ministry of Health just to cap off a few things so we knew exactly what the status of these operators were in Invercargill. And what do you know, one of them didn't even have a licence to retail. He's got a licence to wholesale, so he can actually sell it to the guy who's still operating in the centre of the city. And may I say, he's the only one in Southland now.
Okay.
So he'll be doing a roaring trade. And let's move on to what money potentially is involved in this as well.
Yes.
Because Mr. Skill said in an ODT item that he was servicing 500 clients a day at $20 each.
Yes.
So,
and we can all multiply.
Yeah, well, I'm not so good, but it does mean
We're
lots of clams. Yeah, and so I was astounded at that no one had acted on it. No one had really checked.
It looks, to me, watching the news item, it looked like, the police were there, I'm sure they're doing their best, but it looked like from the government's point of view and its agencies, nobody actually cared. There was a lack of organisation.
The big handbrake went on as soon as I rang Peter. I went to Eric Roy and said, this is what we're doing. We've heard that this guy's trading illegally. He was completely behind what we were trying to do to get some sort of disclosure or some sort of information from the Ministry of Health. I rang Peter Dunn's office, obviously Associate Minister of Health. We were promised endlessly that we would get answers by certain times. They just weren't coming, and we knew. I said to Margot, how do you feel that there's a lot of guys in grey suits now running around going, what are we going to do, what are we going to do? Now, how many other places are operating around New Zealand that don't actually, or haven't been checked up on like this? He's been operating since the 29th, I think it was the 29th of July last year, when they received his application for a licence to retail. He's been operating those 8 months. And I was there, I've been there the last 2 days, watching people just stream in and out of that shop. And I encourage everyone to go to one of those protests and hear what the damage that these are doing.
Well, I missed it. I'm sorry I missed it, actually.
Just a bit of research online or whatever, and you'll see that this is desperate stuff.
Well, up and down the country,
desperate.
I mean, you look at all the centres and people are on the streets and they're angry.
Now,
Go.
Can I just say that regionally, there's a draft policy being put together by the Invercargill City, the Southland District and the Gore District Council.
Right.
So there's a draft policy being put together about where legal highs can be sold
and the hours,
in each place. Yep. And that draft policy is actually out now for public submission. So submissions close on April the 14th. Next Monday. So if you want to have your say, if you want your voice to be heard, it's one thing to be out on the streets saying stuff, but this is your chance to put your name and your case on paper to council. I'm going to be on the joint committee considering those submissions. And so I would encourage anyone to, have your
submissions.
Say. Have your say, and there is a process, and, we're there to listen.
What happens, Karen, if people say, look, I'm not very good with a pen and paper, what can they do then?
There'll be people, I'm not in a position to help fill out a submission that I'm going to be considering, but I'm sure that there'll be if they go into their local council, grab the draft policy if they want to have a look, there'll be ways, but it's not going to be a complicated thing. Your name, your address, you say, I oppose it or I support it. There could be one or two that want to put in a submission saying they support it, that's their right. Or
I'm sure there'll be two.
Well, we don't know. I mean, you've got all those people streaming in. I can't say what they want to say, but get a neighbour, get a friend, get someone in your community that has got those skills to help you. Get them to do it, and then you also have the opportunity to speak to the committee. So put your submission in, and if you really feel passionate or you feel better saying it, you can apply to speak when we consider and hear those submissions.
There is an argument, Paddy, there's an argument which says if you ban these things, you're going to drive them underground.
So.
I mean, How much weight has that got? Is it a reasonable argument?
Well, we saw what it was like before they tried to legalise them, or they made the attempt at legalising them. But I mean, there's only two people who benefit out of legal highs, and that's the people who are selling them and criminal defence lawyers. Because now, when anyone, I don't know whether you noticed, but when they first started hitting the news, there seemed to be an awful lot of people accused of antisocial behaviour who turned up in court and said, "Oh yeah, I'd been smoking legal highs."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the judge sort of, I don't know whether they take it into account or not, but I think the attempt at legalising it has been ham-fisted, and that may be because Peter Dunn's involved, who would know, but he seems to have the reverse Midas touch on everything that he touches. But I think that if it went underground, we know for a fact that the stuff that was being sold before was out there in a chemical sense. It was really out there. And so by trying to manage what's been sold, then, maybe it's making it slightly safer, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done here because, clearly, and it's like any drug, I suppose. I mean, there's people who can snort cocaine till the cows come home, and there's other people who snort cocaine and drop dead. Personal responsibility, but also I think it's got to be that sort of thing. If it is going to be legalised, it's got to be a work in progress.
There's a lot of claims that the legislation was sloppy and that it's just been thrown back at local councils and that the health department was never resourced to deal with it.
I know, I think you're about to say we're about to go into a break.
We are.
But
keep going though.
I have to say that there are some things that society just shouldn't allow to happen.
Yeah.
And to be, if it does mean that pressure falls on the police to enforce these, then so be it. I just don't think it's acceptable, this is my personal view, that these things are being sold and taxed. I know people say, well, you can buy alcohol. Well, yes, I know, but we're stuck with that. We're stuck with it. But why introduce something else? And let's not sanction the sale of these things.
On that note, we're going to go to a break, but don't forget, if you've got an opinion on this, as Karen said, the council would like to hear that opinion as this committee sits. Stay with us because we'll be back very shortly. Welcome back to Newsroom. Well, in town, of course, we've got a serious situation with our buildings hunter, and I know that you've done an article recently on the Freemasons building, which is the Masonic building.
They're not a lodge.
Not a lodge. Okay.
That's the people inside it.
Thank you. Right, good. Those of you who know this building, of course, got a lot of superstructures. That's not the right word for it, is it? It's things on the outside that could fall off. Yeah, this is just one of the stories about the buildings in the town. I know, Paddy, you're going to say something about it too later, but it's one of the stories. And we're at the situation, we've talked about this here before, it's going to cost the council, I think, Karen, 1.5 million or something to survey all the buildings, and then any which are found to be below spec, they've got 15 years to deal with it. But what was the story with this particular building, and what's the prognosis? Because it is being used as a public building.
I think it's about 4 percentile points under the 33, or is it 34, 33% that's required now. And that's an enormous structure, and there's a lot of work. And the Grand Master of Freemasonry in New Zealand said that he was hoping that they wouldn't have to walk away from it, but that's a distinct possibility.
They're concerned about it, obviously.
He's looking at all around New Zealand, of course. I mean, his area is the whole country, and he said that it's up to each local lodge to decide what they're going to do, but to actually, I have heard that that members are having trouble getting into the building and things. It's just the age of the members, and he admitted that they've got declining membership like everything, not just being a member of the Freemasons. But he was saying, I've certainly heard anyway, that that building isn't practical for them. So that it may, who knows, let's watch with interest. But to get on to the bigger picture of Invercargill, I'm Mick Heslin, an historic architect who did up the building, Troopers Memorial Trust building on the corner there, where Pumpkin Patch are. I agree with him that he says that we should just identify those buildings that we really want to keep and go into massive public consultation, and the rest really, we're talking millions of dollars. And there's one building in particular which I won't name, but there's a building that I thought was structurally sound that requires a minimum of $1 million just on near S Street.
Yes.
And so looking at other buildings on S Street, I'm thinking, wow, you know, I mean, you're talking 2 or 3 or even more. Who's got that money? We just have to decide what buildings we want and where we're going to end up with nice little green areas in the middle of town to sit and have lunch when these buildings are gone. Decide which ones we want to keep.
Right.
And, you know, there's certainly going to be architecturally buildings that are unique that we will all, as a community, go, yes, this one is worth keeping, these ones aren't. We regret they're going to have to go, but these are going to have to be the hard decisions that are made.
I don't see how we as a community can make any decision about privately owned buildings.
Well, we will have to if they can't afford to perform the remedial work required.
Oh, I don't know about
It will become our problem.
How long have they got?
Well, 15 years.
years.
5 years to get them tested.
Well, we haven't. The legislation hasn't even been passed yet, so that's one thing. But my understanding too is that this 34% is a minimum, but there'll be some buildings and some banks and insurance companies that won't be wanting to insure something that's at the bare minimum. And that's where this figure of 67% is starting to rear its head, and that's why you know, some buildings that the City Council owns, for example, the minimum that they're looking to get their building standards to is 67%, so that they can get insurance, etc. on it.
And
So
when we're saying percent, of course, we're talking 67% of the structural strength of a new building
Building
as
code,
required
yeah.
by the code, one that would
Yeah.
be built now.
Yeah. But I think it'll be a long time before you get a community saying, you know, we're stepping in to take over from a building owner, potentially, that may have owned that building for a long, long time and been happy to take the money,
rent
the
from
rent
it.
from
Yep.
it, and pocket it and not put it into the building. I think things will just go, and I don't think we'll have the luxury of choosing which ones stay.
Is there a way forward, Paddy?
I've got a cracking idea though.
Oh, let's hear it.
Because you're talking about bringing council buildings up to spec. So demolish that building in Esk Street and everyone shift into Rugby Park. Brilliant.
But why? That would defeat the purpose of buying every building on Lower East Street to build the new council building there, though.
No, that's going to be a car park to replace the Don
right,
Street
the Don
one, because
Street
we're
one,
trying to
that's
encourage
right.
a healthy city by making people walk a bit further. No, I think, I mean, if you go around town, and I park my car about 10 minutes walk from work every day and sort of wander down Tay Street and through there, and I look at a lot of the buildings and I think, you know, these are like university landlords. These people haven't kept the buildings up to scratch.
Same thought occurred to me, actually.
Yeah, they don't. The facades are peeling. They're awful. If they really cared about it,
And that's the front of them. Have a look around
the
the
back. Wood Street's a cracker. There's some beauties around Wood
Well,
Street.
they're all, would be gone.
So, I mean, I think it does come back to, again, it comes back to an issue of the owner's responsibility, and it may be that, you know, they have to, some of them will say, oh, well, this is too hard and walk away. But the other thing is too, and I just thought of it before, was that surely all the structural work they have to do would offer them some short-term tax benefit as well, because surely that's all tax deductible.
It would
You've
be.
got to have the money in the first place, though.
However, then you have the problem that they do all this work and then because they've spent all this money, do the rents have to go up? And we know what issues there are at the moment with a whole lot of empty spaces around town. So it's it's a funny old conundrum, but I think it really does. The council has a role through its building department, but I certainly don't. This is another thing where I'd be very leery of lumping this onto ratepayers.
I think there may be something in the legislation, and I am prepared to be corrected, but there may be some sort of calculation across the country depending on the perception of risk for an earthquake as well. So I don't think all centres surely can't be treated
Yeah, but that's
equally.
what Lawrence Ewell was saying the other
Yeah.
day when I spoke to him. He said that we've really got to make sure there's a provision there, because we're going to have massive warning of an earthquake in Auckland, for instance. If a volcano suddenly becomes active again, it won't be suddenly. It'll
Yeah.
be rumble,
Yeah.
geez, months. Something's going to happen here. Whereas, obviously Christchurch or Invercargill, I've spoken to a geologist who says that we are potentially in a situation where it could be over very quickly. So we would be one of the more vulnerable.
But we have got a situation in the town, haven't we, where we've got a lot of very old buildings which in many respects are not fit for the purposes that the businesses want. Otherwise they would not have gone down in places like down Leven Street and other places and built new premises. And if you look out to the west of Invercargill, you're seeing new buildings everywhere. Businesses have moved into them and they've abandoned the old ones. So is it a losing battle to say, well, we'll strengthen these old buildings, we'll strengthen them all up. Many of them were built decades ago for the kind of business that was running then. Would they be a good investment for the owners? And I think the answer is probably inherent, isn't it?
Maybe we could have a wee precinct like Oamaru has got now, here's our wee historical precinct.
Well, that's what I'm saying with the buildings.
The
Yeah, but
question
they'd
is
have to be all together. You can't have one there, one there, one there. They'd have to be a little...
When was the last time you heard someone say, I'm going to Invercargill to look at the old buildings? What they did in Wellington was good, and that there were a lot of buildings, and this is quite a few years ago now, where the facades were able to be kept.
It's quite expensive.
Like they did with Boys High.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the sad legacy, I think, of poor town planning in recent years by allowing the development into Leven Street and stuff. If that hadn't been allowed and the CBD was kept as a CBD, that would have probably encouraged the bowling over of buildings and the rebuilding.
A more realistic approach.
Well, like
Yeah.
with farmers.
Yeah, that's a classic example, isn't it?
So you're saying it's probably just neglect on the part of the council through not thinking
I don't know
ahead
if
of
it
what's
was
going to happen.
neglect, but you're trying to plan for the future and heady days. I don't know.
I know that certainly 10 or more years ago, when Vibrant was looking at getting people to live in the inner city, the problem with that was that you're repurposing the building, so suddenly they have to meet a whole new code. So you've got to have wheelchair access and things like that. So, and that
Change of
applies
use is
to
a
every
big
building.
thing.
Change of use is huge, and that's
Yeah.
why we've got a lot of buildings sitting around that are empty, and no one's been upstairs in some of the buildings around this city for many years.
Yep.
It is an earthquake that's going to slowly roll out in front of us very slowly as these buildings, the fate is decided one by one.
Right. Yeah. No easy solution.
No, and I'm not saying there's going to be an earthquake in Invercargill. I wasn't referring before the fact that, but we are at the end of the fault line, and there's a lot of seismic activity around here, so we are more vulnerable than Auckland.
Exactly. Yeah. William and Kate have come to town. Well, come to New Zealand. Being well received, you think, Karen? You're a royal watcher.
I like watching the royals, but it's a different.
The show.
It's a different family. Yeah. I like the royal family on BBC. They're funny. Jim, and Barbara, and Denise.
That's a real family.
They're great. They're the royal family. I like them better. This royal family. Oh, the baby's a bit cute, isn't he? He is. Baby George is a bit cute. She had a nice hat on. Her hat was nice yesterday, and her hat was nice. And I think it's quite interesting that she's older than him.
Really?
Yeah, she's a cradle snatcher. Kate is 31.
How much?
A year?
Oh,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
terrible,
yeah,
terrible.
and he's quite balding, isn't he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd give it a shave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
But,
you reckon? No
no.
regain, no tent.
No, Shane Wall.
He doesn't care.
Transplants, he doesn't
He
come
doesn't
back.
Surely
care.
there's a royal expert somewhere that can. Well, no, actually, look at his uncle.
But anyway, nice to see them. Nice to see them.
I think
Nice.
there's
Yeah.
plenty of people around the country are really happy to see them come.
And they're saying that it's the new generation, the young generation, that's really getting into the royals because they can relate to them.
They're immensely popular. They're immensely popular
because
now.
they're like celebs.
Yeah.
You know, they're not stuffy royals.
It's
you know,
completely
they're celebs.
screwed with the old "do you want to become a republic" argument with young people, because
they
they used to
don't.
want
Yeah.
to be a republic in numbers, but now it's like, oh no, good lord,
No.
no, does that mean we don't get to see baby George and stuff?
And Kate, because they are a celebrity.
There's no question about it. You know, the country feels positive in a visit like this. It doesn't do us any harm whatsoever, in my opinion anyway. I don't know what it costs us.
Well, I
but
just play a game of avoiding the media with anything in it.
Well, you just know that National
fun,
are going to get
avoiding
in.
it.
National will get in now because John Key's had his photo taken with them.
Is it fair, Paddy, that David Cunliffe has been accusing John Key of taking photo opportunities?
It's like someone complaining that the captain of the rugby team's got up to make the speech after the game.
Right.
I mean, he's there for a reason. He's the Prime Minister. If David Cunliffe was the Prime Minister, he'd be roaring into this. It just makes him look stupid when he should be focusing on far wider issues. I mean, this is his great opportunity because there's not much else going on at the moment. It's his great opportunity to be putting out, this is what I'm going to do, which sits as an adjunct to the royal visit. But I've got an interesting royal story. Many years ago, I was invited to a garden party at Buckingham Palace, and
what do you mean? Just invited?
And my partner at the time jacked it up, and she said, "You're going to behave," because she knew my views on the royal family. So I went and got a flash suit and got all dolled up and went in there. And I made the mistake shortly after we arrived to the tiny cucumber sandwiches and the cups of tea of asking one of the many policemen there whether it was possible to fire a mortar round from Horse Guards Parade into where we were inside the palace, into the garden area.
It's rather an unusual question, Paddy.
I did wonder. And so I was kept, when the Queen and Prince Philip and they trotted out one of the other old doddery ones, might have been the Queen Mother, bless her,
Margaret.
trotted them out, and they were shaking hands with her, but I wasn't allowed to shake hands with them.
Goodness me.
I know, but at least
They would have vetted you way
It's a bloody good story.
It is actually.
I think that when she put my
that
name
out often or what?
well, no, only when the royals are mentioned.
Well, the fact that he was invited.
It's fair to say I didn't organise that.
Didn't the IRA, it just reminds me of a story from the 80s when the IRA did use old transit vans or something, took the roof off them and did mortars.
That was the problem.
Okay,
this is
yeah.
If I'd asked if they could fire from the
an
mall,
Irish accent or something, don't you?
but yeah, there had been the rather unsightly incident from Horse Guards Parade a few years previously. So, but yeah, the Royals. I mean, it's like having Justin Bieber or bloody or
Take that.
take that coming on a week-long tour of New Zealand. It's the same sort of thing.
Don't be
I mean, I love the
mean
history. To be
Kate.
honest, I love the history, and the Royals are sort of a background event going on in history all the time. They're always there, and I do enjoy it. And I guess you've got to endure the ones that are current because they are going to be part of history.
I think
but it is amazing to think these people are real special because they were born to a certain set of parents.
I find difficulty with that.
Yeah, we're all special.
Well,
where's
that's
the media shooting
But
me?
a commentator just said the other day, a lot of the young people look at William and think, oh, he's going to be king, but he's got to wait till Charles has been
Charles
king.
has been king for 25 years.
Yeah, and so potentially William won't be king until he's 70.
There'll be a whole new generation of young ones.
It's that wonderful genetic material they've got from years of.
On.
To be honest, 20 years ago, I would have said that if I was sitting here today, I would have said I don't really think the monarchy's going to last. But I think Diana changed a lot of things, and I think Kate Middleton has changed a lot more
but
things.
social media has changed
They love it.
Yeah, everything's changed really.
We
We've got
We
more and
love
more
that
shallow,
celebrity,
haven't we?
don't we? We love that celebrity.
I don't think we ever could have predicted it, could we?
No.
I mean, realistically speaking.
I'll just play the game with me and just avoid it.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why you can't.
If I see a
Same.
red dress, which is it's just like, fast forward through the menus.
Yep, same here.
And I like that National Radio are waiting at least 40 minutes into their morning report before they even mention the royal visit.
I have to say, I just about kicked the TV in this morning when it went on, and on One News they had. I better not go any further because I'll start to use words that aren't suitable for television.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move to another topic. Now, Winston Peters is claiming Winston Peters is claiming that the Prime Minister's selling the country, that we're allowing far too much foreign ownership, that Australia is so concerned they've set up a government commission because $37 billion was invested in Australian real estate last year. In 2013, Canada's blocking the whole thing, and so is Hong Kong. And he thinks our country is getting sold to foreign ownership, and it's a bad thing.
He's been
But
saying that for decades.
He's been saying it for decades.
Must be an
decades
election
indeed.
coming.
It rings true to a lot of people.
Is there an
and
election coming?
what I-
Must be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is it because
I
there's an
think there's one
election
in the
coming
wind.
up, and is it going to grab any votes
oh,
for
yeah,
him?
no, well, of course it does.
It does every
Every
time.
time.
I mean, let's not forget, I've worked in Parliament and had dealings with Winston, and Winston's a perfectly personable chap until you disagree with him. If you don't, he likes people to agree with him. Let's not forget, this is a bloke who he says what people want to hear. So he gave a speech on the West Coast last month, where he went on about Dick Seddon, who was the member for Kumara and everything like that, and what a great bloke he was, and how he introduced pensions, and he admitted to say that only 30% of the people eligible for the pension that Seddon introduced managed to get it because it was pork barrel politics. And that's what killed Dick Seddon, and that's what will kill Winston as well, the old pork barrel. But let's not forget as well, this guy still owes taxpayers $158,000 that he flogged a few elections ago. I mean, the guy that he comes out with the soundbite, and the Barry Soapers and others of this world report it, and there's the bashing of the foreigners. But what do we want? Do we want to be some little footprint at the bottom of the world that doesn't, have anything to do with anyone? I think we've got very rigid rules around overseas investment at the moment, and I think they're perfectly adequate. But for him to bash people because they're buying a property here for their kids to live in while they study or work or whatever, I mean, it's just pretty puerile, to be honest.
If it wasn't him, it'd be someone else, though.
Yeah.
There's always, I remember reading political text saying there's that 16% or thereabouts or more or less that vote for a good haircut and a suit and, the cut of their jib.
Yeah.
Yep, and he is very personable, and people when they meet him go, oh, he's a nice chap.
Yeah, I've met him and he did strike me as being a nice bloke.
Yeah.
Smelt of cigarettes, but...
Oh, he always does.
He's lucky to be alive. And just moving slightly sideways from that, Paddy, you've been around Parliament. Toh Henare, he's retiring. Quite a character from Parliament gone.
He's
one of the few people who's actually got into a physical fist fight with other politicians.
Well, no, he got punched, didn't he? Yeah.
I mean, Toh's again a really personable person, but achievement-wise,
he got punched. Sorry.
Yeah. But I can't believe, how anyone could get beaten up by Trevor Mallard is beyond me.
Toh must be a very restrained man.
Well, you'd think,
There's no footage of that, is there?
No, wasn't there?
Was there a stills
something?
photographer or something? I don't know.
He certainly didn't look like a politician that I want to walk up to and punch anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, nice bloke. Again, the sort of person that you'd love to go and have a beer with. But I think his mark on politics will be left in the annals of political history will be fairly small.
Always struck me as having a really good amount of common sense, but we never really heard a lot from him.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he got hidden in the parties, because he started off with Winston Peters.
Yeah.
Well, there's an awful lot of... there's Ross Robertson who's stepping down at this election for Labor, and he's been around for years. Yeah, Ross who, but when I was working for the Minister of Business Development, he was the opposition spokesman, and he did as much for business development as the Minister did. And again, just I'm trying to remember how... out of 80% of MPs we don't hear from because, one, they have to toe the party line, and two, they've got nothing to say. But the ones that are electorate MPs all work hard in their electorates, well, no matter what party they're from.
Yeah.
And the ones that last more than one term, because that's what they base their success on. But let's remember that it's a very constrained environment, and you don't talk, as we've seen with Shane Jones recently, you don't talk out of turn without reaping the whirlwind.
Right, yep. On that happy note, we're taking a break. Stay with us. When we come back, topics of interest. Welcome back to Newsroom, and we have topics of interest now. Karen starting.
Well, I've got a really important topic of interest this week, and it's three important words. And what I want to say to the people at home is I don't want you being distracted. So if you're near the remote, I want you to take the back off, throw away the batteries. Don't be tempted to put me on mute or turn the channel or turn the TV off. Done that, got rid of the remote, keep it out of the way.
My topic of interest.
No, the 3 words
Time,
of public
double
service announcement.
Sit forward on your seat just a wee bit so you can hear me properly. Are you sitting forward? You need to know as
sorry.
well.
You're right, mate.
We're all
Are you
listening.
ready?
We're
You
ready.
ready?
We're ready.
I'm going to make it as sexy as I can.
Okay.
Draft annual plan. How
That's
about
just made me
that?
sick.
Oh
It's
my
the
goodness.
It's the draft annual plan.
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
It's an event.
It's an event, and I just want to say that the Invercargill
She's a
City
councillor.
Council draft annual plan is out. It doesn't sound sexy. The plan's about that thick. It's a
It's PDF
document.
online.
Yeah, you can download it. But
But
if you want to have your say again, the submission period is open, closes on April the 30th. It's your time as a resident of Invercargill. If you live here, if there's an issue that's bugging you, if you want to have your say, now's the time to do it. It's not sexy. I tried my best.
and you can't complain if you've done it, because it is out for consultation, isn't
And
it?
also
you
the
do
Southland
get your say.
District, and it's the season, like it's
It is the
duck
season.
season coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the
Yeah.
season for
Yeah.
draft annual planning.
Yeah.
And to be fair to the council, the draft annual plan is probably the only thing the council do annually that they don't screw up.
And there's a summary as well, so it's quite good. There's a summary, so if you don't want to read the whole thing, you can just do the, yeah.
I like how you ignore that.
Paddy is now being very insulting, so we've got to go to him and see what his topic of interest is.
Yeah, beat beat the draft annual plan.
Mine is the student journalists for the last year or coming up to a year have been working on a story that has made me realise that we've got some real problems in our public sector. As a bit of background, many years ago, I had to use a euphemism, exit someone from a position because they were completely incompetent. Anyway, a few weeks later, I was walking into where the Ministry of Education head office was, got in the lift, and here's this bloke. I thought, wonder what he's doing. So I found out that he'd been employed immediately as a policy wonk by the Ministry of Education. And so I immediately went round my team and found out who'd given him a reference and tried to exit them as well. But anyway, my point is that
What is
for
your point
a
here?
long time I've thought the Ministry of Education
How
is a
many
place
jobs have you
where...
had?
He's on a roll.
The Ministry of Education is a place where failed teachers go to create policy. Now, the story that the student journalists are working on has illustrated this, where
I'm interested now.
I have just received a whole lot of Official Information Act material that just shows that whoever's running the Ministry of Education, I have a lot of time for Peter Hughes, who's the secretary who came from WINS, but the Ministry of Education would have to be one of the biggest sheltered workshops in New Zealand, and the sooner that Hekia Parata realises that and gives it a clean out, the better for
No,
everyone.
say what you mean, Paddy. Say what you mean. Don't hold back. Don't hold back.
Hey.
Say what you think.
Keep going. Keep going. You can
Draft
have mine.
annual plan.
And you reckon Hickey is the person to do it?
Draft annual.
No, I don't think she is, but hopefully Peter Hughes is, but he's not getting much of a chance to get his feet under the desk with all the...
What do you see as the major issues there, or can't you break the story
Oh,
yet?
just a real... there's a culture of... You can't say that... No, that would
Go
probably
on,
be
say it,
defamatory.
go.
No, that would be defamatory.
No, in your
There's
opinion.
a culture of incompetence, and they're so far removed from the reality in the education of what's happening at the coalface in education that I think we're in real danger of having education being hijacked by policy analysts.
Okay. What do you think about the idea about the replacement body for the Teachers' Council having no practice, if it was set up as they propose it, nobody who's a practicing teacher of any sort necessarily on it?
I think that's a bloody great idea.
I knew he was going to say that. Teachers, of course, think that because they're paying for it, they should have some voice on it, which I'm forced to agree with. But
Forced by the PPTA.
I'm forced by my own conscience.
Oh.
If I'm paying, I want to vote. What do they say in America?
aren't there PPTA and NZEI reps?
Oh,
though?
there are at the moment, but
At
on the
the
new
moment.
Educans, they'll all be ministerial
Yeah.
appointments of the ilk of the types probably like John Morris, who's setting the thing up at the moment, an ex-principal from
He was probably associated with the PPTA at some stage in his career.
I've been going for 37 years. I don't recall it.
I think it's up to the unions to then to be able to engage with, engage with that body rather than just throwing stones from outside and try and do that.
I think that's definitely going on. I saw you had a clip with Jerry McNamara the other day. What did he say about that?
Well, it's interesting that there were 400 teachers that got together firstly. I mean, that was sort of industrial action in itself, wasn't it?
Yes.
And he didn't rule out that could be an option. And I'm thinking back to the 80s when there were strikes. It was a great time for students. Teachers actually went on strike. I mean,
I'd just like to see schools doing proper background checks so you don't have kiddie fiddlers and, people like me who have no qualifications and have just, made them up. My Harvard MBA hanging proudly on the wall, just slightly photocopied.
Let the 37 cats out of the bag there.
I mean, that's been a cry, hasn't it? That the Teachers' Council themselves called for a review of themselves, and this is what's come up. And there's a lot of people finding it unacceptable. And I was just interested to see what you think about that. But it would be the only body in New Zealand, or the only such professional body, which had no proper representation from those who were funding it.
Is National just deciding that they're never going to have the teacher vote anyway? So you can.
They might well.
I mean, the old rule was you never. If you're going to do anything with the teachers, do it in the first year of your parliamentary term, because any time after that you'll be
70,000 votes is a heck of a lot. Wouldn't be the first time they brought a government down.
70,000 teachers.
Someone quoted that. I thought that sounded like too many.
14 weeks holiday.
I think they've included in that number.
Rugby.
I think they've included in that, Paddy. It would be all the early childhood centres, universities, SITs, polytechnics, etc., because there's only about 16 or 17,000 secondary teachers, and I think probably twice as many primary teachers.
I mean, SIT, they're not teachers, they're tutors or lecturers or whatever. I can't imagine.
Contract, sort of Harvard MBA
Provides
graduates.
sometimes useful information.
Or not. I have to be careful too, because I do live with someone who is in the education sector, and I'm probably going to get one in the slats when I get home.
That's all right. You see, we're the type of people who can actually take it and take robust discussion. But I'm going to go to Hunter.
Yeah, you sure we don't want more time on the draft annual plan?
Annual
Because
plan.
I'm actually a big supporter of draft annual plans, and this is not my...
Right.
Oscar Pistorius, is he as guilty as a puppy sitting next to a big pile of poo? I mean, for God's
You
sake.
keep going on about this guy, but he's still in the news.
Yeah.
Well, he's on the stand now.
He's on
crying.
right.
Crying, I mean,
Dry
come
and
on.
retching
He
again.
sounds really plausible too, doesn't he?
If he gets off, he'll get an
I
acting
just
job.
can't believe that you wouldn't check. Everything just doesn't ring true about what this character's saying about his behaviour, and I would have to say that if it was a normal South African court over this, it would be all over. And we all know that his defence attorney has schooled him through everything he's saying. Everything he is saying and doing will be basically scripted. I can't believe the man fired 4 rounds through a closed bathroom door without even bothering to check that his beloved girlfriend was not actually just in the toilet.
Well,
Having a wee in the middle of the night.
Most of us who are in relationships, you're very aware when someone gets up out of bed in the middle of the night.
And to say that he even rolled over to reach for the massive handgun under the bed, I mean, often you feel the resistance of someone in the bed on the sheets and blankets.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about that.
I mean, no, Karen,
the way the
just
guns
think of
are
the
set up-
draft annual plan.
The way the guns are set up in our house, I'd have to actually climb over the
the
other
guns
person
are
in the bed.
That's right.
You've got a mortar, haven't you?
But
I
he's
mean,
getting
really,
no more
come on.
invites.
If this guy gets off, and I thought that because there's no juries in South Africa, so he's not convincing a jury that he's innocent. He's convincing a judge, but the judge is letting him off because he's so upset. Only 40 minutes on the stand. Oh, look, Oscar, my mate, I'm sorry you're so upset.
Well, hold on,
It's
she's
just-
a black woman, so that's...
I know,
who would
but
have
God,
foresaw that?
every
I
generation-
I wouldn't have. I
no
would have thought
mercy,
she was
though.
tough.
Every generation needs an O.J. Simpson.
Well, we've had ours. This is the next generation. is
Yes,
it?
the next.
Well, if he gets off, I despair. Well, why should I really? I mean, this is celebrity stuff, isn't it? I mean, the poor girl, she was obviously hit in the hip first, and tell me she wouldn't have screamed. It's just a joke. He fired those flathead bullets that peel back when they impact on flesh, you know? Yeah. Anyway, let's watch it with
Okay.
interest. I can't believe it. It's over a year ago, and I'm sorry if he's very emotional about it and he can't sleep and he smelled blood, but I imagine you would be after putting 4 rounds
Guilt.
into someone.
Have you ever? Everyone will have heard someone pretending to cry. Oh, I'm really
Yeah,
sorry.
mate.
That's
I did
what
it myself.
sounds like.
I did it myself, mate,
David
just the
Bain
other day.
sounded like that when he phoned 111.
Yeah,
He sounded
yeah.
exactly the same.
It's a dead giveaway. It's like some kid trying to get
Mark
something.
Lundy.
Oh, wow, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and he's about to go to court again.
So we watch that one with interest.
Lord.
As
Oscar
we-
should have used the the legal highs as an excuse.
We wait for the outcome of all these stories and of all our discussions. Thank you so much for being with us this week, and look out for us in a fortnight's time. And on that note, I'll say ka kite no. We'll see you later. And thanks very much to the panel.
Cheers, Bill.